we have something else before news, too.
Yeah, we want to mention our sponsors.
Yeah, we've got these things called sponsors.
Sure wouldn't be possible without them. They're really awesome. This Week in Cloud Computing is brought to you by Verticore, Storm on Demand. I'll be singing a little song, as I always do every week, to Verticore. Yep. NetDNA, and their respective Twitter handles are at Verticore, at Storm on Demand, and at NetDNA CDN. Yes. So please thank our sponsors.
Yeah. Especially given that they've stuck with us. You know, here we are, episode 11.
They have, I know. It's been great. And they jumped right in the beginning, too.
Yeah.
So it's not only that they stuck with us, they jumped in rather fast.
Exactly.
So hats off to all of you guys.
Cloud computing was important.
Yep.
So news. Lots of big news stories this week for cloud computing.
Yep.
Starting off, Oracle's kind of slapping Microsoft on the wrist a little bit, almost like a tax.
Yeah.
You know, they're charging for the open document format for Microsoft Office.
Okay. So let's explain what that
plugin.
is. So Oracle bought Sun.
Yeah.
Sun created the open document format, and so and it was free. It's been free up until now.
Yeah, Sun was nice. They let people have it for free.
Now it's not open source.
No.
So
just open.
Some people are saying, "Oh, this is a terrible move by Sun because it was open source." It's not open source.
No.
It's a commercial product. It just happened to be free.
Yeah.
So Oracle is now charging for ODF for the ODF plugin for Microsoft products. And the more I read about this, the more it seemed like Oracle was basically taking advantage of the fact that people need to upgrade from the older version of Office 2003 to 2007, and they're unwilling to. And so this is sort of a nice stopgap.
People still have 2003?
I do on one of my machines at home too, yeah.
I know people who do too.
So there's no reason for me to upgrade. It works fine.
True.
To be honest with you, so. Did you have a question?
Well, yeah. I mean, the question is kind of a few different sides of it. Is this going to help ODF sales? And also, how's it going to will it help or hurt smaller businesses specifically? That's what I'm concerned about. So
let's go to our guests.
Duncan, what do you think? Can you hear us?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. So the open document format, Oracle is now charging for it for Microsoft Office for their plugins. So is that going to help the sales of open document format? And
I guess at adoption probably.
Yeah, the adoption of it.
Or will it hurt it?
Yeah.
I think that's. I mean, it's very hard for me to comment on really Oracle's overall strategy here. But I think it's a little bit of a sneaky thing to actually come up along. I mean, basically, it's one of the issues you have with a lot of these plugins and so on is that you're given stuff free to begin with as a teaser.
Yeah.
And then it's actually, I think, important if you actually step away from just looking at Oracle and looking also at, if I want to relate this to my own sort of area of expertise, cloud computing, what is going to be the actual end game in terms of what we're going to pay for things. And I think it's actually kind of hard to know that, and it's also very hard to get out of people, detailed long-term pricing for services that are currently many times in beta. So I think I would relate it to the broader issue of how do we charge for and how do we develop new business models, which are in many ways one of the most critical aspects of cloud itself, along with the technology.
Very nice. I have to comment also, Duncan, just on your wonderful image that we have that we keep throwing up, because Duncan obviously is not from New York City, if you can't tell, folks. He lives in Edinburgh and he's visiting New York City, so, got a little bit of skyscrapers in the clouds behind you there, Duncan.
Thank you. Yes, that's very kind. Yes, I'm a volcanically displaced person. I've been here this is the third week of my 1-week trip out
Oh,
to
my
the West
goodness.
Coast.
Well, glad to have you. Aaron, what are your thoughts on charging for the ODF plugin?
Hey, how you doing? So I have not had enough time to think about this, but I think that at a high level, as it relates to Open Office and the future of that software suite, I think that the more support, the better, probably for that package. And so, if it makes sense to charge for it and really create a business out of it and making it a meaningful revenue stream, I think that will be useful, because I think that there is a lot of room for Open Office and the open document format and sort of the whole whole ecosystem in general to certainly improve. And I think that having business models around that will actually, create the proper incentive to to have competitive development on improving the standard and improving some of the formats that are out there. So ultimately, I don't think it's a bad thing. I assume that there's still going to be open source licenses that allow developers and people to build on this stuff in very serious ways. And I expect that this is more of a move for Oracle to have a commercial version that they can support for enterprise customers. But that's again not knowing too much about the specifics right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean I think it's a good thing, to be honest with you, because your upgrade path is either go from you have Office 2003 right now,
right,
to this open Office plugin, or a more modern version of Microsoft Office.
Exactly.
Either way, you're going to be paying. So it's not like in any other case. So to be honest with you, I think it's fine.
Yeah. And it's actually good business practice to charge for
amazing,
products,
I know.
Right? Wow,
incredible. Not
imagine
everything's
that.
free.
Imagine that, folks. Wow.
Yeah.
Story number 2. So another previous guest of This Week in Cloud Computing, Ellen Rubin of CloudSwitch, she attended the Cloud Computing Expo last week, another show that occurred last week, and she said, at first glance, cloud computing can appear to be virtualization taken to its logical conclusion. And she mentions a recent Gartner study noting that cloud computing is the number 2 priority for CIOs, trumped only by virtualization.
Right.
So, let's throw this out there. Do you guys agree? I mean, is cloud computing, is virtualization taken to its logical conclusion? Sure. So, Duncan, what do you think?
Well, I think, you also have to be careful here, because Gartner also said at the beginning of this year that in terms of strategic initiatives, cloud computing should be the number 1 focus for a CIO. So I think, whether their day job is consumed with trying to deal with implementing virtualization or not, I don't know. But I actually think cloud has actually trumped virtualization already in terms of developing, as an enterprise, a strategy around cloud, and not just around cloud as infrastructure, but also around how to develop software for the cloud. In terms of your actual question, which I guess I should try and answer, I'm not really, I don't really see it as the end game. I mean, people that know me will know that I love the whole sort of story of the moon program, the NASA sort of space program. And if you look at something like a Saturn V rocket, which is probably amongst the most, if not the most complex piece of machinery ever built, it was built in stages. And so you could actually, I think, argue that the first stage, which really is what got it off the launch pad, could be argued as virtualization. Yeah. The second stage, which actually gets you pretty far out through into the upper atmosphere, is actually infrastructure as a service. And then really the third stage, which is, I think, really starting to heat up now, is what actually puts you into orbit. And ultimately, if you're on and I hate to be geeky here, if you're on
be geeky, it's wonderful,
mission,
Duncan.
then that's what you use to actually launch you into space. So I think, think of platform as a service as being really the third stage. And obviously there's been an huge announcement this week, only yesterday, around platform from Salesforce and VMware. I think of it as 3 stages in a rocket, all of which are necessary, but certainly I would disagree with the statement that virtualization is somehow the logical conclusion or the end game. Think of it as more of the first stage.
Excellent. So would you say part of this is a lexicon thing? Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard this, my thought was, in both cases, you're virtualizing your infrastructure. It's just a question of whether you do it or somebody else does it, and you pay them for that as a product. Now, there's more to it than virtualization, as Duncan is saying.
Right.
But I do think, and he's basically making the argument that these happen in stages. Virtualization is the first stage of the rocket. He's right. But I do think in both cases it is virtualization, and so therefore it's just a question of where it occurs. Exactly. That's what I see as the main difference.
Exactly.
Well, I guess you could argue it's the hydrogen fuel, maybe, if you want to get picky, which does feature throughout. But and I think we also need to be careful here that when we say virtualization, we don't trip over ourselves and accidentally mean just server virtualization. Okay. So clearly, one of the areas of interest for us is really virtualizing the application itself.
Right.
Sure.
That's a good point.
Sure. Aaron, any thoughts?
Well, I won't be able to compete with the space analogy at the moment, but
that was a good one, huh?
But if I may go aquatic right now, that could. No, I'm kidding. So I think not from a technical standpoint, but I think from a conceptual standpoint, the cloud really. I think that's what maybe the reference was in the quote in terms of at scale, if you kind of look at what virtualization is all about at scale, again, in principle, the cloud is meant to deliver on a very similar extended sort of vision of that is when you've been able to essentially virtualize all of your platforms and your software and your data center to the point where it's abstracted in a very real way from the actual hardware and software that you're maintaining. And so I think that's why that's why it's a fine I think reference. And I think but ultimately at the end of the day, I think the platform of service as sort of the final frontier is incredibly powerful. The VMforce concept makes a lot of sense. I think we'll probably over the next 3 years see hundreds of announcements just like that, where we see the different kinds of layers and stacks come together in a very virtualized, cloud-oriented way.
Mm-hmm. I'm loving this. It's the show of analogies. We're going to have to post all of these online and make sure that we've got all these snippets for everybody after the show. Story number 3, because we keep touching upon this and hinting at it. Salesforce.com and VMware have officially announced VMforce, which we had covered very briefly on a previous show, and at first, the words first got out there about it. So it's a joint product that will give the world's 6 million Java developers a new way to deploy applications in the cloud. There isn't any word yet on pricing, but it will be available in the developer preview later this year. And I'm assuming the closest competitor is going to be Microsoft's Azure.
Azure, and also Google has a platform as well.
Yeah.
I think it's Google Gears. If I'm mistaken, that's the name of it.
So, Duncan, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about this announcement. So, what are your thoughts on VMforce?
Well, I think there may be thousands of announcements like it downstream, but I think this is probably very significant, being the first of those, and also the fact that if you leave aside the fact that when I actually watched the webcast yesterday, obviously there are two different agendas here, but in a sense you need to part what each company is trying to do and look instead at the value that it brings, because companies are companies. They have reasons and motivations, some of which are clear, some of which are less clear, but the end result, as far as I'm concerned, is VMware have basically, in a sense, eaten their own baby. They basically realized that virtualization is only that first stage, and that really the only way they can actually maintain the momentum is, and obviously was to buy SpringSource, and then a much more modest but equally significant acquisition only last week, RabbitMQ, is this is all part and parcel of actually moving from infrastructure to the platform. And I do hope there will come a day when we'll stop talking about infrastructure and just focus on the value that the platform is providing, really in order to give people a highly productive, very natural, very sort of intuitive environment in which to develop applications, because we all tend to get kind of focused on what we do for a living, and it's always good to remember the end result of all this is meant to be a platform that provides people with a much more efficient delivery for applications themselves. So the one thing I've learned over the past 25 plus years is, application developers, and I would include myself in that, are really tourists when it comes to things like infrastructure. And we're probably best, kept in the tour bus, far away from the infrastructure. And in a sense, that's what this is setting out to do, but doing it in a very natural way and building on the Spring framework. Okay, there have been other things like this, but this is Java, which is, I think, hugely significant. It's also aimed fairly and squarely at the enterprise. So, cloud has had its fun, and it's had its sort of adolescent teenage years, and now it's getting serious, and now enterprises are getting very, very serious about this. And I think, looked at like that, it is a major step forward. And I think, making it accessible to enterprise, to the vast majority of developers, is a huge plus.
Yeah, I agree with Duncan. The story here is that it's Java specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's basically now the Java developers who had no path, no bridge to the cloud, if you will, now have a very large bridge. Mm-hmm. And it is aimed at the enterprise as opposed to goofing around with web stuff.
Exactly.
Which is sort of where I think in a lot of ways where it's been.
We're going to have another story in a minute about a path to the cloud. But before we do that, I want to throw this next question over to you, Aaron, this next story. Another Salesforce story, actually. They've also acquired business contacts directory startup Jigsaw. Kind of a Wikipedia of contacts, really. And Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff said, Salesforce.com is advancing the shift to what he's calling Cloud 2.
I was just saying Cloud 2. When did that happen?
I know. Are we even through Cloud 1? I mean, he's saying Cloud 2. And he's saying where productivity gains are going to come from real-time collaboration available on any device. We've seen the future of enterprise software, and it looks more like Facebook on the iPad than Yahoo on the PC. So, Aaron, my question is, what are your thoughts on the enterprise cloud mimicking our favorite social solutions?
Sure. Well, we at Box are, definitely big believers in that. It's funny that somehow Jigsaw would be the consequence of a quote like that, but I think they have a lot of different reasons why that investment might make a lot of sense in terms of strategic intentions that we don't know much about, or other sort of additional revenue streams or business models that matter to Salesforce. So I'm not sure if that directly is the quickest way to get to kind of Facebook for the enterprise, but ultimately this notion and paradigm shift wherein if you are working in an organization, it should be as easy to share information and knowledge and data and business intelligence as it is to share photos and content with your peers or friends. And so I think what we've seen is this massive step function in communication that we've gotten in the consumer world, and now there's a lot of savvy businesses and enterprise software companies that are saying, well, the same thing kind of makes sense in the professional world. And so right now it's a bit of a race to see who can kind of develop the most flexible, the most usable, the most connected, the most feed-oriented business software possible. And so that's what a number of companies are doing. And I think in this process, we'll actually see some organizations be filtered out just because of their own ethos or ability to kind of produce these types of products, and a whole new category of software emerge. We like to think from Box.net. But you'll also see some awesome innovations from folks like Yammer or Jive Software, or some of the newer players in social business software. So yeah, ultimately we're massive believers that it's all about making information easier to share, information easier to consume, information easier to connect to other platforms, and again, all for the benefit of the customer.
Mm-hmm. And what a powerful thing for Salesforce to be able to include all of these contacts, most up-to-date contacts as well. So from a business perspective, yeah. Ooh, I could hear my whistle. Echo, echo, echo. That was great.
That's pretty good.
Okay, moving right along. So we've got to get to some other stuff here. Story number 5, we have F5 Networks made a big splash at Interop on Monday. Mm-hmm. They announced an upgrade to its big IP line of application delivery controllers. The new version helps extend enterprise data center architecture to the cloud by letting technology departments employ on-demand IT through a dynamic services model. So the question is, it's meant to address the range of requirements that are put forth by businesses that base their networks on different mixes of virtualization. So will it be effective? Duncan, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Just a couple. I mean, I think at the heart, what they've done is provide really a set of blueprints. Sometimes they're called thumbprints that really give people a head start in terms of actually sort of managing large enterprise applications, for example. So there's been a lot of work done in this sort of arena for a while, trying to fingerprint applications and so on. And this is really applying that same idea and saying, instead of you having to reconfigure things from scratch all the time, you're being given a huge number of different templates that you can work from. And so these are infrastructure templates rather than pure application templates, the way we think of Chef or Puppet and manufacturing things like virtual images containing particular stacks. But I think it's a great idea. Whether it's the biggest idea this year or not is not for me to say. But I think it's making life easier, and it's all part of, I think, an initiative that's happening at all layers in the stack, where companies, whether they're F5, CloudSoft, many others, are all gearing up to try and make it easier for enterprises to make the most of cloud, whether they're doing it private or whether they're doing it with a trusted third party, or whether they're actually dipping their toes in a public cloud resource.
And I mean, I think another point with this too is that businesses they do have different levels of virtualization that they're looking at. So I think that's key to this. I want to move right along since we are a little pressed for time. Going to this whole path to cloud computing, we also have a story from Red Hat. This week, they've announced a new program that they've dubbed Red Hat Cloud Access that migrates enterprises that already have existing premium subscriptions to Amazon's EC2 cloud. So, existing subscribers, enterprise subscribers. Do you think that this is in response to Ubuntu's cloud strategy, Mark?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably
because they're stepping up their cloud strategy.
Yeah, it does
big
feel like
competitor
a
action going on there.
So I would say yes. I think they're being forced in this direction. It's probably not something they would naturally do, but like everyone else, they're getting swept along. So yes.
Okay. And do you think existing subscribers are going to take advantage?
It depends on what they're using it for. I mean, there are definitely instances where the cloud makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
So as we've discussed, ad nauseum on the show.
Exactly.
So I think a significant portion of them will at least look at it. So.